All right, in our first example, we're going to talk about how to classify polynomials. And our question we're being asked is, how can you write a polynomial in standard form and then use it to identify the leading coefficient, the degree, and the number of terms? So let's go ahead and talk about what some of those are, and then we will identify those in this polynomial that we have. So first of all, a polynomial. That's a word you guys have seen before, probably not in a while. This is a polynomial right here. Polynomial is made up of monomials. So negative 4x is a monomial, a single term. This 9 is a monomial. This 2x to the third power is a monomial. So a polynomial is the sum of one or more monomials. So if you have one or more terms and you are adding, and you could be adding negative numbers, which would be subtracting in between, you put that all together, that is a polynomial. So standard form of a polynomial is going to have all like terms combined. So if we check out this polynomial, there are no like terms to combine. And the proper order to write this, and I don't think you guys will be surprised, we're going to start with our highest exponent with our variable. So the highest exponent here is a 3, so this whole term is going to go first. It's a positive 2x to the third power, so 2x to the third power. And now we go in descending order of our exponents. I would look for an x squared. Do we have any terms with an x squared? We don't, so I'm going to move on to an x to the first power. Here is a term with an x to the first power, so that's going to go next, minus 4x. And then an x to the 0 power. So let me just remind you, anything raised to the 0 power is equal to 1. So this term, 9, we call that the constant term because it doesn't have the variable with it, but technically it's a 9x to the 0 power, which is 9 times 1, which is why all we see is the 9. So that plus 9 is going to go on the end. So there we have standard form of a polynomial. It's basically make sure all your like terms are combined and put it in the proper order. Highest exponent goes first and then in descending order. All right, then we've got this thing called a leading coefficient. The leading coefficient is going to come from the leading term. So this first term right here, 2x to the third power, the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the term, whatever number we're multiplying by our variable, x to the third power. So the leading coefficient in this example is a 2. So having your polynomial in standard form helps. That leading term, the leading coefficient is the 2. The degree of a polynomial is the highest exponent of your variables. Well, the highest exponent is going to be found in the leading term also. It's actually that 3. We're raising an x to the third power, so the degree of the polynomial is 3. That degree tells us what type of function it is. If a polynomial has a degree of 3, that means it has an x to the third power, and we call that a cubic function or a cubic polynomial. We had x to the second power. That was what our entire last unit was on. If your degree is 2, what do we call that? That's a quadratic function. If you have an x to the first power, which you saw in middle school, a lot in algebra, if the degree is 1, that's a linear function. So the degree of your function will tell you what type of function it is, what type of polynomial. We also could say a cubic polynomial, a quadratic polynomial, a linear polynomial. And then because this polynomial has 1, 2, 3 terms, we would call this a trinomial. If we had something that had 2 terms, let's say 2x plus 1, 2 terms, that's a binomial. So you guys have seen some of these words before, so we're just bringing them back in, reminding you what they are.